You're watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.
Welcome to The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report. I'm your host, Simon Cherin-Gordon, finally adhering to executive producer Alex West's dress code. So I'm excited to get the colloquial ball rolling here this week, guys. Let's swing the rock around to our team, but we're going to start by introducing a special guest, NBA Math's Dan Favale.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on, Dan. We also have 94 Feet writer Josh Cornelissen.
Guys, I'm here to key our listeners into some NCAA tournament insider information. There's an under-the-radar Methodist school in Durham, North Carolina called Duke University. They have a likable, innocent senior named Grayson Allen and some unheralded freshmen that I think could lead them to a deep run.
We have our resident draft expert, Patrick Oxford.
Speaking of March Madness, is everyone ready for the next great Cougar run? 5-shooter jumper.
And we have our founder/editor-in-chief, Eric Spyropoulos, back on the show.
Guys, if I see a little bit low energy tonight, it's because I was up until 3 a.m. watching Drake and Ninja play Fortnite.
Let's get things started with the opening tip, guys.
The opening tip.
The playoff race in both conferences is extremely tight with 1 month left in the regular season. 4.5 games separate a 6-team scrum in the East, and that same number separates 8 teams, seeds 3 through 10 currently in the West. Let's focus on who's going to emerge from the pack. We've talked about the bottom of each conference in recent weeks, but I want to get your number 3 and number 4 seed picks in both conferences. We'll start with Patrick on this one.
Yeah, Simon, these playoff races are really heating up. For my 3 seeds, I have the Indiana Pacers out East. They've been playing really well lately, and I'm confident Oladipo is going to keep up his just stellar play that he's been doing all season. And then out West, I have the Trailblazers. As Lillard said, they're the real deal.
Patrick, I'm right there with you with the 3 seeds. I think Portland's built itself enough of a cushion, and they're playing really well on both sides of the ball. So I think they got the inside track on the 3rd seed. And I'm with you with Indiana on the 3 seed. They're tied with Cleveland right now, but they have an easier path, and I think they're playing better as a team. They don't have the same ups and downs that Cleveland does. But dropping down to the 4, I think the last 2 spots for home court will be teams that aren't currently in those spots. So in the East, I actually think the Philadelphia 76ers are going to slide up. And the reason is that their schedule the rest of the way are just filled with cupcakes. It's like every single tanking team is going to take a tour through Philadelphia. And so I think that the way that Embiid and Simmons and Redick and that whole team is playing right now, I think they're going to mow through those easy wins and slide right up the playoff standings. And they don't have to slide far to get the 4th seed. And then out West, I think the Utah Jazz are on a tear right now. Rudy Gobert is a monster in the middle. They're getting great contributions from other positions, a lot of times unexpected spots. And I just think with the ease of their schedule as well and the way they're playing, they're going to overtake the couple of games needed to pass teams like New Orleans and Minnesota. And I think they're going to end up as the 4 seed.
I definitely see where you're coming with those picks, Josh. Philadelphia has, like you said, the easiest schedule you can imagine. And Utah has been absolutely on fire since Gobert came back. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep that up. The team I have scheduled or projected to be my 4th seed is the Timberwolves. I know they're missing Jimmy Butler, but they have an insanely easy schedule coming up with an opponent win percentage of 47% compared to teams like the Thunder, who are at 60%, or even the Jazz, who are at 51%. So looking at those numbers, I think a decent argument could be made. Minnesota could come in and may not be called stealing considering how close it all is, but I think some people would consider it a steal. Back East, my 4th seed is going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm going a little more vanilla than you are, but their strength of schedule is the 2nd easiest at 47. The Philadelphia 76ers, if you're wondering, were at a 40% win percentage left on their opponent's schedule. So I definitely see your arguments there, but my picks are the Cavs and the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I think everything's so tight in the West that it really could be anyone. So Minnesota, Oklahoma City, even San Antonio, I think there's reasonable arguments to all of those. So Minnesota over Utah, I think that's fine. I think it's wrong, but not very wrong. In the East, though, I think the Cavs pick is wrong. They have not been playing like a team that's going to hold on to a spot. They're really only winning the games against the easy teams. And I just think that what's happening with trying to gel this roster and all these different pieces and figure that out on the fly while dealing with all these injuries to their front court is just going to doom them to slide a little bit further down the standings. More interesting is not, are the Cavs going to have home court advantage, but can the Cavs make their way out of the East for yet another season when they're coming from that's what I think we need to look at, because I really don't think they're going to hang on to either the third or the fourth spot.
Yeah, injuries are certainly playing a factor for Cleveland right now, but they're also playing a factor for two teams at the top. Guys, let's move on to talk about the Warriors and the Celtics. Boston and Golden State are both pushing for the number 1 seed in their conference, and those pushes have both gotten a whole lot harder lately. Golden State has played without Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, David West, Jordan Bell, and Pat McCaw for segments since the All-Star break. And Boston has been without Gordon Hayward all season, obviously, but is now also without Marcus Smart, Daniel Tice, Al Horford, Kyrie Irving, and Jaylen Brown. Let's first look at this from the Warriors' perspective, though. While Curry and Thompson's extended absences may cost the team the number 1 seed, there's also a chance that that could get them some rest heading into the playoffs as they gear up for a 4th straight finals run. And it could also get some bench players that have really looked uncomfortable most of the season some needed run with the starters in more big minutes. Guys, is there any chance that this could be a blessing in disguise for Golden State, provided that obviously Curry and Thompson are going to be okay heading into the postseason? We'll start with Dan on this one.
There might be a chance it's a blessing in disguise. It certainly seems like they're just being overcautious when you look at what Stephen Curry told reporters about his ankle. But when you're dealing with a fractured thumb on Klay Thompson's shooting hand, that's potentially something that could be a problem down the line. Andre Iguodala's been hot and cold all year. Maybe he turns it on, but maybe he doesn't because he's been in cruise control for so long. I think it's good to get a guy like Draymond Green rest every now and again. But if all these injuries start to pile up, when you look at how well a team like Houston would be playing, I fall short of calling it a blessing in disguise, just because you want to make sure all your guys are healthy, and them just dealing with injuries in general on such an across-the-board level is disingenuous to that.
Yeah, so if you could guarantee me that Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and all their guys are going to be fully healthy for the playoffs, I would lean towards more of a blessing in disguise, though. I do agree that anytime Steph Curry and ankle injuries are brought up, it is a cause for concern, and Klay Thompson's injury in particular could affect him shooting-wise, but if they're both healthy, the Warriors are a team that don't need that number 1 seed, unlike the Rockets, who have made it their, they've personally revealed that they're going for that number 1 seed, and, whether that's a good or not thing, that's a whole other discussion to have about the Rockets. They're going to try and get that 1 seed. They're going to really push for it. The Warriors don't need the 1 seed. They can easily go into Houston game 1, game 2, if that were the case in the conference finals, and get a win or maybe even 2 wins there. That's just how good the Warriors are. So if you could guarantee me that, Curry and Thompson and these, however long it takes, like 2 weeks maybe, give them all the time they need. They don't need home court advantage. They don't need the number 1 seed. They need to be rested and fully healthy for the playoffs to go for another chance at a championship, which is going to be a 4 straight finals, which obviously can wear on a team. So that's why enough rest in March and April is more important than, playing these regular season games, trying to get that number 1 seed.
I agree with both of you. I also want to add that Golden State has been playing without that edge that they've had over the last 3 seasons, and going into the playoffs as a number 2 seed could help them get that back too. But let's transition over to the Boston Celtics. It's a lot more murky over there. It's first of all hard to call their bumps and bruises a blessing of any kind, with Hayward out for the season and now probably Smart and Tice as well. But how bad is it, guys? Let's say those guys don't return, but everyone else comes back 100%. Where does Boston rank among the Eastern teams that are realistically vying for a trip to the finals?
I think you'd probably have to put Boston 4th in the East if they're not going to have those guys back. Behind the Cavaliers, behind the Raptors, definitely behind the Sixers. You could probably even make a strong case for the Bucks and the Pacers at that point. Marcus Smart is the biggie for them. Al Horford might finish 2nd or 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting this year, and the Celtics have been good defensively when he's playing on his own. But when you talk about the lockdown defender, the closest thing Boston has to a lockdown premier defender, it's Marcus Smart. He's the guy you want going up against those individual matchups on the wings. He can even defend some in the post. He's gotten a little bit better at running pick and rolls too, so you can use him as a secondary playmaker. To not have him in the lineup is really going to hamstring Boston's identity, and if you can't say just him alone is going to be back by year's end, I don't know how you would put Boston as one of the 3 most likely teams to emerge out of the East.
Yeah, I agree, Dan, to an extent. In terms of the Boston Celtics not being, that number 2 team as they'll probably finish in the standings. The Raptors have been playing out of their mind. They obviously have to be a favorite, and they're going to have home court advantage. The Cavs are a really hit or miss team, but when it comes to the playoffs, LeBron James turns it up, and that might have another effect on his teammates, and we'll have to see how they look with Kevin Love getting back. Another team like the Wizards could also be a real threat to the Celtics without Marcus Smart. And also another thing that matters for the Celtics is how fresh Kyrie Irving is, because he also has that knee injury that, they say he'll be back for the playoffs. They say he'll be fine for the playoffs, but I think Danny Ainge said it was something he's going to have to monitor and probably have surgery on maybe in the offseason or sometime in the near future. That could linger into the playoffs and wear him down. So if you don't have his great, isolation scoring, go-to option offensively, along with Marcus Smart missing on the defensive end, that's going to be a problem for both ends of the floor for the Celtics. So I could even see a team like the Wizards sneaking in, and they always play the Celtics tough, and if they're healthy, and obviously they have to integrate John Wall back as well. So I could see the Wizards beating the Celtics if they don't have Smart and a non-100% Kyrie Irving. The Cavs could certainly do it, and of course the Raptors are there. But I think up until that point, I probably would put the Celtics there ahead of other teams like the Sixers and the Bucks, because we just haven't seen it from those teams yet. But of course, things could change this season. But I think it depends not only Marcus Smart, but also having an 100% Kyrie Irving who's fully ready to go for the playoffs.
Yeah, Eric, and you bring up a good point. We shouldn't assume that Kyrie is going to be 100%, especially hearing the report today, Danny Ainge saying he may need another knee surgery at some point after this season or some point down the line. But let's say for the sake of discussion that Irving is 100%, just to look at where this team might be in terms of a ceiling, because we have seen them play the Wizards. We have seen it be a tight series. We've seen them struggle against LeBron James, obviously with a healthier team, but that was a different team because they didn't have Kyrie Irving, who's a proven playoff stud. I mean, we know his resume. So, Eric, do you think that this team might have a higher ceiling than it has in years past under Brad Stevens solely due to Irving's presence?
Yeah, Simon, it's tough to say because we really haven't seen Kyrie Irving on his own in the playoffs as the lead wolf for a team that's not really fully 100%. Obviously, the Celtics are going to be that case without Gordon Hayward, probably not Marcus Smart. So we don't know in terms of Kyrie Irving leading a team. Obviously, he hasn't had a coach like Brad Stevens before, which also kind of adds into our evaluation of Kyrie Irving in the playoffs. But he is a proven playoff stud. Isolation scoring is really important in the playoffs. But we don't know yet with Kyrie Irving. I wouldn't say it's a high ceiling. But we just don't know yet, but we're going to find out this playoffs for sure.
What do you think, Dan? Do you agree with that?
I agree with it to an extent. We're certainly going to find out this year, assuming he's healthy, but their ceiling just feels lower. Maybe not lower than last year, but they're not a team that's going to come out of the East with him as kind of their lead alpha right now. We talk about how isolation scoring is important in the playoffs, and it is, but when you're the only guy that can really do it, and since they're missing Gordon Hayward, he really is the only guy who can do it unless Jason Tatum kind of comes of age. That's going to be a problem. We've seen better players like James Harden struggle in the playoffs when it's only just him. You need at least that secondary option, that safety net, and Boston doesn't have it, and there are only 3, maybe 5 guys who can handle that type of load on their own and carry a team out of the conference or maybe even into the conference finals, and Kyrie Irving is just not one of them.
All right, guys, let's talk Defensive Player of the Year. After some mammoth battles for this award over the last few seasons between Kawhi Leonard and Draymond Green and Rudy Gobert entering the fray last year, we're going to have some new faces in the race down the stretch this year. Green is playing with slightly less ferocity and intensity than he has in years past. Leonard obviously has missed almost the entire season. And while Gobert has been as dominant as ever, he too has missed 26 out of Utah's 68 games. Might be too much to warrant real consideration. Joel Embiid seems like the likely front runner right now. Paul George, Al Horford, Kevin Durant, those names have received buzz too. I'm skeptical about Horford and Durant's resumes, but they'll certainly receive votes. But I want to throw it to you guys. If you were picking a winner today, right now, who would it be? Let's start with Josh.
Simon, I think you're right. The field is more crowded this year, but the theme seems to be big men, which is different than in years past where we've had guys like Kawhi Leonard, Draymond Green, more forward-type players that have won the award. I think that Anthony Davis, Yusuf Nurkic, Al Horford, Joel Embiid, all these guys are having really good defensive seasons and having a major impact on their team's successes. But for me, the front runner is still Rudy Gobert. Yes, he's missed time, but he's played in 43 games, which is only 12 fewer than Joel Embiid. If you assume Embiid misses a few more for rest down the stretch, Gobert could easily be just 8 or 9 games behind him. And then is that enough to drop him behind Embiid? The Utah Jazz have a 97.5 defensive rating when Gobert's on the court. That would be the best defense in the league by far. and they're 105.6 when he's off. So that's 8.1 points different per 100 possessions. That's a huge impact and more significant than the best offensive players over this next best offense. And so I think that the difference in Utah's defense when he's on the court makes that difference. And I think you can see that in their record since he returned. So he had multiple stints off with injury, but they're 20-4 since he returned. And they have a defensive rating of 95.1 since his return, a little, even better than his impact on the season, which is best in the league by over 6 points. So again, his impact defensively is helping Utah be that much better than any other team in the league. And I think that impact is what makes him the front runner.
Josh, it is true that Embiid and Gobert could end the season fairly close in games played, but you're already starting at a deficit with Embiid, who's missed some time as well, and it just reaches a point where it might just be too much. I do agree that Gobert has been dominant, though. Patrick, do you think it's one of these two bigs, or are you taking it another direction?
Simon, I am going to take that in another direction. Josh tried to gloss over the fact that Gobert has only played 1,349 minutes coming into Thursday night, and I don't think that cuts it for Defensive Player of the Year type impact. Al Horford, on the other hand, has played 1,932 minutes. I think being the anchor of the best defense has incredible value, and we should reward that. Marcus Smart has been huge, and if the defense falls off with Marcus Smart hurt, then I think that ends Horford's argument. But as of now, I have Horford in the lead.
Yeah, Patrick, I kind of take that the other way. To me, Horford is not a top candidate right now simply because of the structure he has around him. If Boston can maintain number one with Smart out down the stretch, that would throw his name into the race for me, but he's not there yet. But let's go to Dan to close this one out. Dan, are you going to agree with either of these guys? Do you have a third take for us? Like I said, it's a wide open race.
I'm going to take it in a different direction and go over to Joel Embiid, who to me just distinguishes himself from both Horford and Rudy Gobert. We talk about minutes played. Joel Embiid's probably going to cross the 2,000-minute plateau, which is something I don't think the Sixers even could have expected from him. He's likely going to hit 65 appearances. That's huge for the sample size. Then you look at Horford. Boston is the best defense in the league, and he deserves love for being a part of that. But their defensive rating almost goes unchanged when he's off the floor. That doesn't diminish his value, but you look at Joel Embiid, the Sixers defend like the best team in the league when he's on the floor and experience a significant drop-off when he's off. Rudy Gobert has that argument too, but again, we're talking about Joel Embiid playing in more games, playing more minutes than Rudy Gobert. I think the combination of those two arguments just really makes him the front runner at this point for me.
I see where you're coming from with the Embiid pick, Dan, but I don't think we should penalize Horford for the Boston defense being good while he's off the court. It comes down to he's very versatile. He can guard multiple positions out on the perimeter. He can step in, play help side defense. He can play positional defense. And he can guard players like Giannis, Ben Simmons, LeBron, any player in the East, and he needs to guard come playoff time. He has the ability to do it. And I think we need to ask ourselves, is it most valuable defensive player or just the best defensive player?
I don't think you can discount anything Al Horford has done for Boston. And it's not a matter of penalizing him, but Joel Embiid can hold his own in space as well. He doesn't have the same freedom to do it because the Sixers aren't running out any good backup rim protectors behind him. The other thing is he noticeably manipulates the way offenses approach the game in the half court more so than Al Horford does. It's super valuable that he can switch, but the fact that Joel Embiid appears to be more of the rim deterrent, and not even that, but when you look at how guys get into the lane and they're second guessing and they're deferring more because they don't even want to shoot from floater range when he's around. That instilling that second guessing is just something that Al Horford doesn't do. And I think that's why Joel Embiid's probably just slightly more valuable when you look at everything kind of in the macro like that.
I do want to mention one other name who probably can't get in the mix for the top spot, but could make his way onto the ballot, and that's Jusuf Nurkic. And yes, he's having a down offensive year, and yes, he was just murdered last night by LeBron James. But the Portland Trailblazers have the league's seventh best defense this year, and they really don't have any other defensive personnel around him that would lend to them having a strong defense. They haven't had a good defense in years past, and the only thing that really changed this offseason was Nurkic, who was added at the trade deadline but only played about a dozen games last year. he has been an anchor in the middle, and he doesn't have the help on the perimeter that these other players have. Philly's got guys like Robert Covington, TJ McConnell, Ben Simmons is playing really well defensively. In Utah, you've got Joe Ingles, you got Donovan Mitchell, who is generating steals. Ricky Rubio is great at the point of attack. And we've already mentioned that Boston has great defenders like Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, these other guys. So when you look at Portland, they don't have these defenders. They have undersized backcourt players. They're playing CJ McCollum, Shabazz Napier, tons of minutes. Really, the only thing propping up this defense is Jusuf Nurkic. And so I think he needs to at least be mentioned for his contributions there, even if he has no chance at ever being acknowledged for his defense ever again after what LeBron did to him last night.
Josh, you raised an interesting point with Nurkic, and I think it's something that applies to this whole discussion as well, is rebounding. Nurkic is an excellent rebounder. Embiid, Gobert, even more elite in that regard. Horford comes up a little short there. So for me, well, the versatility is great. Even a guy like Draymond Green does a little more work on the glass when he's a 5 than Horford does. But it'll be a great race, and this last month is going to determine a lot. Let's move on to buy or sell, though.
Buy or sell.
Minnesota Timberwolves wing Andrew Wiggins has gone from being a first to a third option over the last couple seasons. It started with the emergence of Karl Anthony Towns, and then the subsequent trade for Jimmy Butler pushed him down lower on the pecking order. And Wiggins is an on-ball scorer at heart. So I guess it makes sense that he's unhappy with how the changes have impacted his role. But apparently he's been whispering about it to teammates, according to a report by KSTP's Darren Wolfson. Guys, do you buy or sell that Wiggins has any legitimate gripe here, or that he is being improperly deployed by Tom Thibodeau on a team that does have Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns? We'll start with Eric.
Yeah, I mean, does it make sense that a former number 1 overall pick who is expected to be a star in this league has a problem being a third option in just his 4th season in the league? Yes, that does make sense. But if you want to talk about is he being properly used, when you have Karl Anthony Towns and Jimmy Butler on your team, Wiggins is automatically the third option. He has shown an ability to score, not that efficiently. He has shown very little playmaking abilities, and even with Jimmy Butler out over the past 10 games, 7 of which Butler has been out, Wiggins is only averaging 1.8 assists per game, which showed that even in an increased role, he has not done anything to create good opportunities for other players. It's just, he is the third option due to the talent they have on their team. I'm not surprised that a guy of Wiggins, status, being drafted number 1 overall, being all the hype, is he the next LeBron James, blah, 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 that happens with pretty much every number 1 overall pick. I'm not surprised that he's disappointed being the third option, but if you look at their team and their situation, and what Wiggins did in his first 3 seasons, albeit he was very young and on a very bad Timberwolves team, it just makes natural sense that he's the third option. And now he's the number 2 option, though sometimes on some nights he just takes over as the number 1 option, despite Karl Anthony Towns being the superb offensive player, and then Jimmy Butler being there as well. But when Butler's out, Wiggins is taking over, and he still hasn't done much in terms of playmaking and other things besides scoring, which is why he's just naturally not the best offensive option for the Timberwolves.
I hard sell as well. The extent to the Timberwolves or Tom Thibodeau being at fault might be that because he doesn't rely on his bench enough or sit guys for long enough stretches, Wiggins isn't going to get that solo time. But the mark of a good player is adjusting to your surroundings. Karl Anthony Towns has a lower usage rate on the season than Andrew Wiggins, and he's been fantastic. Like Eric said, he's going to be a better playmaker than Andrew Wiggins. And we talk about Wiggins being an on-ball scorer. He's closer to Dennis Smith Jr.'s efficiency on pull-up jumpers than he is a guy like Kemba Walker or CJ McCollum. He hasn't earned the right to necessarily be unhappy in this role. And given the returns that we've seen through his first few seasons, the Timberwolves don't really have a reason to think that he should be that guy. And in theory, if you're going to take more shot attempts off the catch or have a lower usage rate, it should be because your shots are getting easier. And to see his efficiency decline this season is a big red flag and seems to be more so on him than the Timberwolves as a whole, or just even Tom Thibodeau and the way he coaches the team.
All right, next buy or sell question here, guys. This Kawhi Leonard saga is getting so ridiculous. First, he was reportedly set to potentially come back last night against the Pelicans. It didn't happen, and now we still have no idea when he'll be back. In fact, teammate Tony Parker said that at a certain point, Leonard returning doesn't even make sense. Guys, do you buy or sell Parker's take? Do you think there is a literal point of no return for Kawhi this season?
On the one hand, I can buy this take, but on the other hand, I can also sell at the same time because it kind of depends on what the Spurs want to do. If they really want to make the playoffs, then I'm going to sell that take because I think that they absolutely need Kawhi to make the playoffs. Obviously, it's the Spurs. Greg Popovich can get, wins out of the most random off-the-street role players. But if you look at their schedule coming up, they've got so many tough games. The Timberwolves, the Warriors got a game with the Rockets. They have a road trip in which they face the Bucks, Wizards, Clippers, Lakers, and Pelicans on the road in the final game of the season, and then they have OKC at home. They have so many tough games coming up that if they actually do want to make the playoffs, they need Kawhi. But if they look at the situation and say, you know what, maybe a year out of the playoffs, a year in the lottery, making sure Kawhi is healthy for next season and try and rekindle that relationship between him and the organization, then I kind of buy that take and just kind of sit him out, leave him healthy, get a lottery pick, get some young talent in there, and kind of, just sit down with Kawhi and see where his head's at mentally and then also physically, because he's eligible for that supermax extension in the summer. And obviously we've heard the reports of the frayed relationship there. So if they want to get a lottery pick and get some young talent and really kind of figure out what the relationship is, sure, I buy that take from Tony Parker. If they want to make the playoffs, I sell that take hard because they're going to need Kawhi to do so with that heavy schedule.
I sell the take all the way. It's as Eric said, if they want to make the playoffs, they need Kawhi Leonard. You look at a point and say there's only 5 games left in the regular season, and he compromises that pursuit by needing to work in. You could argue that he needs to sit, but you look at their potential playoff opponents, whether it's the Warriors, the Rockets, the Blazers, the Thunder, they're not winning a best-of-7 series against any of those teams without Kawhi Leonard. And even if you are headed towards the lottery, we're not talking about the difference between them having like a top 7 pick and sliding into the top 12. They're not going to be particularly high enough in the lottery order to begin with, and there's going to be more value in, can we get Kawhi Leonard right ahead of next season and ahead of this summer when he's going to be eligible for that supermax extension. They just need as much playing time from him, as big of a sample as possible this season to determine not only where they're going now immediately relative to the playoff race, but how they're going to approach his contract situation this summer.
All right, guys, let's move on to a March Madness lightning round here. And where I wanted to start is with Michael Porter Jr. back for Mizzou. We have yet another lottery talent added to what was already an insanely deep field in the tourney. Pretty much every top pick that is playing college basketball this year is active in this tournament. Now, Trae Young Sooners already bowed out, as did DeAndre Ayton's Arizona Wildcats, but there are still a ton of lottery picks to watch. So from an NBA prospect standpoint, strictly that, which college players and matchups are you most eager to watch this weekend? And if you want to go on from there for the rest of the tournament, we'll start with Patrick on this one.
Simon, I'm excited to see some defensive players get some recognition in this tournament. There's a lot of players like Keita Bates-Diop, Admiral Schofield, Jacob Evans that are great defensive players that should be rising up draft boards if teams really know what they should be looking for in that 10 to 20 range. So I'd like to see the Tennessee-Cincinnati matchup next weekend. That would be a really fun matchup, I think, seeing Schofield and Jacob Evans match up against each other. It's pretty much a scout's dream to get that much possible film on 2 high-profile players like that.
Yeah, I think it's great that so many potential lottery picks are going to be active in the tournament. Sure, guys like Trae Young and DeAndre Ayton are already out, but there's so many guys that are still in. And I think you've got a lot of potential matchups of 2 teams that are just loaded with talent. For example, everybody's looking ahead to that Sweet 16 matchup of Duke and Michigan State. There's potentially 4 top 10 picks there with Marvin Bagley and Wendell Carter for Duke and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Miles Bridges for Michigan State. I think that's awesome. I think you also can look at Michael Porter with Missouri. Is he going to be healthy enough to make an impact? How's he going to look? He was a bit rusty last week for his debut. Does the extra week of rest and preparation prepare him to actually make an impact and maybe help Mizzou make a push into the tournament? And I think Patrick mentioned a lot of guys that have good defensive chops. One guy he didn't mention was Zaire Smith, who defensively really took over their game last night against Stephen F. Austin. And without him locking down the defensive side and Keenan Evans making some big plays on offense, they may have been upset by a 14 seed. And so I think seeing players like that who are digging in and helping in ways that they can actually help in the pros, because a guy like Zaire Smith, he's not going to be the primary offensive option, but he will be the guy who really needs to make an impact defensively for whatever team he's drafted by. And seeing him do that in the college ranks really helps you project how he'll look in the pros. And I think it's those kinds of things that teams will be looking at as the games continue.
Okay, guys, just for a minute, I want to shift the focus strictly to college. I want your hottest tournament take, whether it be an upset this weekend, a prospective low seed going deep into the tournament, out of the box national champion. What is it? We'll start with Josh.
I think this year the chaos is going to reign, and we're not going to have a single number one seed in the Final Four, especially with looking at Xavier with defensive problems, Virginia with the injury to DeAndre Hunter. I think this could be another year, only the third time in tournament history, where not a single number one seed makes the Final Four.
Yeah, Simon, my take is that by the end of this tournament, Jaren Jackson Jr. will be seen as the number one big after he wins the national championship.
All right, last question here, guys. Let's go back in time to close this thing out. I want your favorite memory of a current NBA player in the NCAA tournament. It doesn't have to be a star, but just looking back, when you think about this guy, you think about that tournament, it's what sticks out to you. We'll throw this one to Dan.
I immediately go to Kemba Walker in 2011 and his game winner against Pitt. Maybe because that was probably the last year I really cared too much about college basketball or paid a lot of attention to it. But ever since then, just watching him, it just feels like he hasn't missed a step-back jumper from long mid-range with the game on the line ever. I'm sure that's statistically valid. I'm sure that the stats will back that up. It just seems like watching him, he never misses in crunch time when he goes to that shot ever since he hit that game winner against Pitt.
Yeah, Dan, I feel the same way about Gordon Hayward. I don't think I've seen him hit a half-court shot ever since he missed in the championship game against Duke. Let's go to Patrick next on this.
I'm going to make defense the theme tonight. Anthony Davis winning the national championship in 2012. 1 for 10 from the field, 6 points. He racked up 16 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 6 blocks to beat the Jayhawks. That's all about defense to me, and though his impact isn't fully felt in the NBA yet, it shows the potential he has.
My memory goes a few years further back than you guys, back to 2009 Elite Eight. Blake Griffin and the Oklahoma Sooners took on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, Carolina was loaded. They would go on to win the title with a roster flush with NBA talent. Ty Lawson was on that team, Wayne Ellington, Danny Green, Tyler Hansbrough, Ed Davis, Tyler Zeller, on and on and on. And Blake Griffin was still the best player on the court by far. They had to double team him on every possession. And even then he was scoring. He was pump faking, up and unders, putbacks, dunks. He was a monster. Hansbrough just gave up. They didn't even put Hansbrough on Blake Griffin. They moved him off and would just double with 2 different players because Hansbrough was just getting beasted. Unfortunately, Oklahoma didn't have enough talent outside of him, really no other NBA players on the rest of the roster. So Blake Griffin had to do it alone and ultimately lost by 12. But he put up 23 and 16, and the eventual champions only won by 12, even when the talent was that offset. And that's how good Blake Griffin was in that game. I just remember sitting watching that thinking, this guy's going to be good.
All right, great discussion, everyone. That's all the time we have for today. Before we go, any last-second shots, buzzer beaters? We'll start with Dan Favale of NBA Math, our guest today.
I have to just throw some parting shots at the Phoenix Suns. Young teams that are bad are just supposed to be fun to watch, and they are unwatchable, even when Devin Booker's doing things. And the little kerfuffle they instigated with the Jazz on Thursday night, completely random, unwarranted, unprovoked, stupid. I'm running out of reasons to watch this team. If it wasn't my job, I probably wouldn't tune into them ever.
I don't remember the last time I watched a Suns game because it's not my job. But thanks for being on the show, Dan. Let's go to our editor-in-chief, Eric Spyropoulos.
Guys, I don't think we talk about it enough that the Memphis Grizzlies have lost 19 games in a row.
Eric, I think what you just said warrants talking about it too much, actually. Let's go to Josh.
I think in the midst of all the college basketball going on this weekend, we can't lose sight of how many great matchups there are in the NBA this weekend. Saturday, we've got Timberwolves Spurs, and then a crucial Pacers-Wizards game where Indiana could lock up the tiebreaker against pretty much their last Eastern Conference foe that they haven't yet secured a tiebreaker for. And then Sunday, 4 games, 4 great matchups. Rockets, Timberwolves, Thunder Raptors, Celtics Pelicans, and Trailblazers Clippers. Each of these with crucial playoff implications. So tune into some pro basketball this weekend.
All right, and we'll close out with Patrick Oxford.
Now that Arizona and DeAndre Ayton lost last night, everyone should check out the article I collaborated with Yusaki Arauli on the 94 Feet Report. It's a great article breaking down his defense, and I know everyone is curious about how they gave up so many points to Buffalo.
I see what you're doing there with the subtle use of the words breaking down and defense while showing us that shirt, Patrick. Thanks for watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report. I'm your host, Simon Cherin-Gordon. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future episodes every Friday. Follow us on Twitter at the 94 Feet Report. Follow me on Twitter at Simon Sego, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.